Our second reader this evening is a writer, tutor, and dog walker. She's contributed to the Wall Street Journal on hard-hitting topics like custom stuffed pillows and dog food delivery services, and also to the drive-through section of Gaper's Block, R.I.P. Her essays have appeared in Salon, Barrel House, Brooklyn Quarterly, and Lowestoft Chronicle, where the essay she's reading tonight is published. She volunteers as an assistant fiction editor for the Pithead Chapel and has faced yours truly on the field in Chicago's Media Softball League. Still, we remain friends. Please welcome back to Tuesday Funk, Lori Barrett.
Thank you. And I would like to put in a little plug for Vanderpump Rules for the easy escape from 2019 and 18 and 17. So one night, while my husband Joe was still at work and I was in bed, approximately 4,000 miles from the place I considered home, I was startled by a cooing noise, like a We were living at the time in an apartment in Brussels, Belgium. Sometimes birds hung out on the window ledge of the building next door because the person who lived there put scraps of meat out. This sound was almost like a pigeon, but not quite. After a few minutes, the cooing sped up. I wondered if one of my son's battery-operated toys on the living room floor had a faulty wire and was squeaking its last breath. The cooing grew louder and more rhythmic. A female voice shouted, "Whee!" A few seconds later, she shouted, "Whee!" again, and then again. And I realized I was hearing something that I didn't want to hear. 6 months earlier, my husband Joe had emailed me from the other side of the newsroom in New York City where we both worked at the time. Want to move to Brussels? Over 2 days, we exchanged messages about the job in Belgium and about Jean-Claude Van Damme, who's known as the Muscles from Brussels. And we talked about muscles, the bivalve, and the possibility that our newborn son Henry would become the next Muscles from Brussels. Offline, the talk was more serious. Raising a baby overseas sounded exciting, though I dreaded the idea of moving away from family. But we were young, and our parents were relatively young and healthy enough to travel. So we decided to move. We flew to Belgium in late January of 1998 with 6-month-old Henry and a 3-legged dog. The newspaper put us up in a temporary apartment and arranged for a few realtors to show us apartments with American amenities. "They're building homes with family rooms now," one realtor said as she drove to the far reaches of Brussels. We declined the family rooms, driveways, large washing machines. So they sent us to see a woman with a blonde bob and a bright yellow blazer. She drove us through the rain to some apartments closer to downtown. On a particularly gray-looking street, she parked in the middle of the block, across the street from a gas station. "I don't think this will be the place for you," she said. I agreed. We squeezed in a tiny elevator that took us to the 3rd floor of a building directly across the street from the gas station. Once inside, we fell in love with the apartment. Huge living room windows in the back looked out on red clay roofs and the pointing spires of the Grand Place in the distance. The day we moved in, so did our downstairs neighbor, a young man with a shiny silver sports car and equally shiny hair and the overpowering smell of styling products. As Joe got comfortable in his new job, I tried getting comfortable in this foreign town where milk came in boxes and my favorite television shows were dubbed in French. I met our neighbor upstairs, a woman named Paula, who was from Spain. She spoke English and helped us figure out the controls on the dishwasher and the fact that a person and a load of groceries couldn't ride in the elevator at the same time. Our well-coiffed neighbor downstairs kept to himself, and to his girlfriend, who spent most nights at his apartment. In order to better understand the shopkeepers and the parents on the playground I had been pantomiming with, I signed up for a French class. The first day, 8 students from vastly different backgrounds gathered at a table in one of the office buildings on Avenue Louise, a strip of shops that was Brussels' equivalent to the Magnificent Mile. The teacher asked each of us how many languages we spoke. A British man who worked on an oil rig in Norway said he knew 3. A woman from Pakistan who was living away from family for the first time said she knew 4 languages. An aspiring model from Germany knew 3. The other American woman and I had the same answer: English. A few nights after I heard the cooing sounds, Joe was awoken by them. "Oh, that," I said, and rolled right over. It became a regular thing. Sometimes I'd stomp on the floor to convey the fact that I was awake and unhappy. One night, when I couldn't sleep through their boisterous affection, I became curious how directly bedroom French correlated to bedroom English. So I consulted my Lonely Planet phrase book. Her phrasing was slightly different than Lonely Planet's. She yelled, "J'arrive!" A slight variation from the recommended phrase in my book, "Je viens." Both employ the verb to come. Paula stopped me in the hall one day and asked if the noise bothered us. "You can hear it too?" I asked, surprised. She was above us. She nodded. "Have you complained?" "No, I haven't," I said. I wasn't comfortable enough with my language skills to knock on the door and to try to navigate that conversation. I wasn't even comfortable enough to leave a note. I tried to compose the note in my head as I lay awake listening to her moan. Would I say, "I can hear you faire l'amour"? Would I ask her to arrive more quietly? Could I ask her to dépêche-toi or hurry up as she arrives? I stewed in sleep-deprived resentment. Part of what annoyed me was the timbre of her voice. With Henry, we watched a lot of Teletubbies in those days, and this woman sounded like Lala, the yellow Teletubby with a high, breathy voice. In the spring, my Uncle Peter came to Belgium from Boston for work. We took him to our favorite restaurant for dinner, and we walked around the park and the pond that was near our apartment, and then we went home, put Henry to bed, and opened some Belgian beer. "How often do your parents get to visit?" he asked. "They come about twice a year," I started to say. We were interrupted by the I put on some music, hoping to avoid an embarrassing uncle-niece conversation. "The nice thing about when they come," I started to say, I meant my parents. I meant to visit. The cooing had become moaning. Uncle Peter raised his eyebrows. "This happens almost every night," I explained. Joe nodded in agreement. I stared at the floor. Occasionally, one of us smiled. I'd see Lala in the hallway, usually on days. One of us filled the elevator with groceries, so we both ended up on the stairs. She was always friendly, even though I gave her dirty looks. After a summer trip to visit family, Henry and I sat on the sofa fighting jet lag and watching the Teletubbies. When the lights clicked off, I didn't think much of it. The elevator always made the lights flicker. The television went black, and then I realized that the power was out. I picked up Henry and carried him into the stairwell to see if it was just our apartment or if the lights were out in the rest of the building. The door slammed behind us. I was so jet-lagged I'd forgotten to hold it open with my foot. We stood in the dark hall. I wasn't sure what to do. Joe wasn't due back from work for hours. My first thought was Paula. I carried Henry up the stairs and knocked on her door. There was no answer. I tried our door again, the faint hope that I might get it open. And then there was only one other choice. I went downstairs. Lala answered right away. She smiled warmly. I explained in my broken French with unconjugated verbs and misplaced pronouns that I had locked myself out. She invited us in and gestured for me to sit down. She handed me the telephone and handed Henry a cup of iced tea. I didn't want to make a big American deal about caffeine and sugar. So I accepted the drink and the phone. The playboy sat on his sofa and barely acknowledged us. Joe agreed to come home with a key. We just had to sit and wait. This was my chance to mention the noise. She gave Henry potato chips. He said. She said, her eyes wide. He kicked his legs with glee. He pointed to the lights. It was always his conversation showpiece. Light? Read, she said. Their wordless conversation was joyous. She offered me iced tea. I felt welcome in her home, something that didn't happen every day in Brussels. I'd spent months pointing, gesturing, nodding. I understood the importance of nonverbal communication. Lala, without appearing to try, had elevated this skill. By a couple of decibels, yes, but with charm and generosity. I asked her name. From then on, I skipped my nonverbal stomping when she communicated her joy late at night. She deserved to be happy. And I found peace when she moved out at the end of the year.